Yeah, I'm having a duration, a duration, yeah, during the wild Reagan, the Reagan administration, yeah. I'm having a light year lifespan in duration as intellectual lifespan. What it means to be, I don't know if it's considered to be a conversion from analog to digital. Or some idea of like a light scribe. Yeah, so like having a thing more and more the secrets of the temple house preserver runs the country. And think about the equator in Pearland, Texas, seemingly be the book of presidents and governors, seemingly not limited to some analyticals of like movements in the New York Federal Reserve Banks of monetary domestic gross national products identified in the secrets of the temple house Federal Reserve runs the country. And it's almost like the similarities in movements of, like even in the book Nimitz Class and another book, Turbulent Waters, that have the analytical placements of like the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean. Likewise, the triangle. You've probably seen the triangle of like the eccentric triangles. There's like two of them, and they're like stretching and I wouldn't really call it morphing. Although it's bouncing and crossing over eccentric triangles. And the thing with this is that it seemed to be like the wall. Okay, and it's ultimately getting to graphite and the Bureau of Vital Statistics and the footprint on the birth certificate, and a bunch of information that seemed to be linking some idea of like De Beers diamonds and even Anchorage, Alaska, and all the alphanumerics and linguistics and analytical and symbolic analytical, and it seemed to be the deal about the Nimitz class as like the Astros baseball team in Minute Maid Field, specifically because it's Minute Maid Field. And the thing about auditing legal media as compared to like transcripts and court proceedings of actual transcripts being identified as minutes is the thing. It seemed to have the similarities of the book Nimitz Class and the movements associated in the Houston, Texas area involving the Houston, even more so the Houston Astros uniform during what appears to be the different shades of orange involving the grayscale. The grayscale in a way that the Houston Astros uniform, especially during Nolan Ryan, having I think close to like 7,000 strikeouts in his career, and Nolan Ryan originating from like the California Angels, and then the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. It seemed to be so the three and the Nolan Ryan Expressway and Highway 288 in the Pearland, Texas area. And it seemed to have the connectivity of Minute Maid Field, just for the mere sake, of it being the Astros. But the grayscale, it presents the 10 different shades of what is normally the standard, identifying a standard of the 10 shades of grayscale. Yet the Houston Astros, before, during, and after, I'm not sure if it was all at once, but there was like the 5 shades of grayscale on the Houston Astros of the orange, and the 6, and the 56 is 10. It seemed to be the Roe v. Wade thing, really ultimately getting to like even Y2K, a combine of like alphanumeric numeric value will ultimately get to 94, annotated adoption and abortion, and it seemed to be the 3 of whether or not if litigation de facto and res habeas corpus is only some idea of appreciation or depreciation in some idea like in my mind, and I'd like to really hear Washington D.C. like really get on that congressional act and identify what the yeas or nays is to domestic and monetary aggregates as compared to gross national product of commercial venue of living quarters. obviously the grade beyond, you know, a local area internet protocol, a local area network, a maritime law, and you know, like in the Houston, Texas area, you know, the ship channel is like, you know, I mean, it's automatically identifying, you know, that on television, and maritime law on K television in the Houston, Texas area, and I'm assuming as well as like predominantly, you know, any idea of like, I mean, if it's going to be ultimately like a redundant frequency being a grid, of neighborhoods, or what 8 ohms is to, you know, just a known common factor of like some idea of like, you know, resistance as the alpha and omega. You know, the ohms resistance, 8 ohms of resistance is predominantly, you know, during, you know, like summit meetings in like the Houston, Texas area, and you know, phenomenally huge, you know, worldwide, you know, tour, you know, concert venue, and then, you know, what was in the summit turning it into the Compact Center and the Houston Rockets, the basketball team, and automatically it's like the basketball team, and I'm actually trying to place if it's, I'm not even going to guess at it right now. I don't think about it, but it's the Oracle basketball, the city and state and the basketball team. I have to think about it, but Oracle is the thing like in my mind with like Robin Williams and a Bicentennial Man. A movie motivated in my mind is like the Alphamerics 200, and a plenipotentiary in transportation in the Lord Jesus Christ, and all the Alphamerics of like a bicentennial drummer. And the Oracle Corporation in Redwood, California is predominantly a huge major factor during that movie. Yet it presents the idea somewhere with Robin Williams being likewise in addition with a television series, you know, Mork and Mindy, and that sounds about 909. I mean, you know, that V-twin thing about, you know, the thing about the V-twin, and even Mr. Spock in Star Trek. Okay, but the thing of it is that that V-twin, it's almost like the actress in my mind, you know, like, and the electric effects combo guitar amp Line 6 V series, and it seemed to be the alphanumerics, you know, of Line 6. Being the alphanumerics of 92 and a drummer and a pentagon, and it has that connectivity of the guitar and the drummer, alphanumerically, and it seemed to be having all the connectivity of what seemed to be representative of like Fort Stockton, Texas, and the James Lamoille unit, okay, and the Ector County, because it seemed to be the Ector County. It's like the Vintage Love 30 in my mind automatically. I mean, you know, the Ector County, the Pecos, and the Pace. And the Pace concerts, the Pace operating system, Cape Canaveral, the Cape, the Pace, and think about, you know, the Houston Rockets, and that one location, you know, being the Summit and the Compact Center with the Houston Rockets, and now Lakewood Church, okay, with Joel Osteen and Victoria Osteen, yeah, and everyone there, you know. The thing is that I mean, it's like at that one particular spot inside the 610 Loop in the Westland area, pretty close, not far from the Israeli embassy. And the thing with it is that the Israeli embassy, it presents itself with that color, kind of greenish, kind of like the colors of a 13-band graphic equalizer, of night vision, of ambience of nano, being measured in nano units, nanoluminance of night vision. I mean, the glass on the building itself, I mean, I'm almost for certain that would be, you know, the automatic thought of like a pastel, like the pastel green of ambience of like a 13-band graphic equalizer. Likewise, in addition, like night vision, which ultimately gets to, you know, all the ohms resistance, and the 8 ohms being like the alpha and omega, and the thing about, you know, the infinity with the 8 ohms representing, you know, the idea of like a, you know, infinity and perpetuity vision, like in the planetarium, using the stars, and you know, the figure 8 and all that escapade stuff about, you know, the Arctic Circle, and even the pi r squared in a 90-degree, you know, that way. But it seemed to be like all that information seems to have some idea in my mind of like grayscale. And ultimately, the thing about, you know, Boulder, Colorado, with like Mork and Mindy, with like Robin Williams, you know, later making a movie Bicentennial Man in Redwood, California, of the Oracle Corporation. It seemed to be the deal of Boulder, Colorado, presenting the font size and what the deal is in between the hospitality. Oracle's like, automatically in my mind, something really about the hospitality. In any case, so like it seemed to be ultimately leading to like a diners club, and the font size of what was presented as just a circle with a vertical line in it had actually during a duration the symbol of the diners club symbol of the font size had changed, and I think it was like 5 shades of the grayscale of the blue getting darker into like a midnight blue. And it's kind of, like a, really ultimately, it seemed to be the thing about, that halo left side of the US $1 between the C and the PTIS of a new compass above the pyramid, and the I representative, what is referred to as the deity, the United States Treasury on the backside of the US $1. So, I mean, it seemed to be like the euro dollar, the euro dollar in that way, as well as the Diners Club symbol. Ultimately, it will get to a 90-degree about that. And it seemed to be the vertical side of Japanese and quantum, reading Japanese from top to bottom, and the 90-degree of like reading English from left to right, and the 90-degree of a quadrant representing like the world globe of spherical quadrants and what looks like a football in shape, or some idea of like analytical and symbolic representation in the Oval Office in the White House, representative like international financial management and globalization, and the big deal about relation in between platform and architecture, embedded encryption. In any case, so it seemed to be, I was reading that book, Nimitz Class, and seemingly it has the information. It's similar to even, Orson Welles narrating Nostradamus. The thing with this is that it's like sets of threes. It's almost like Mercedes-Benz 3-point, yet the triangle, yet the 3-point, yet the triangle, and, the yes and no thing about, the analytical thing about it. But anyway, so it seemed to be like a Nimitz Class is kind of like almost like the Minute Maid field, and like United States Supreme Court proceedings is like auditing legal media, more so than like the thought of maybe post-production as maybe whether or not of integrity is the idea of a deposition as like international law, or some idea of like the grade the grade of like maybe some idea, maybe not necessarily the idea of grades as maybe not the degree. And it seems to me like the American Bar Association, okay, seems to present some idea of grace in my mind. I mean, just with the word association itself, some idea of like a panoramic academia and peripheral tolerance, yeah. But it seemed to be like the Nimitz Class. It presents all that movement of the 3 nuclear-powered aircraft and 3 powered nuclear submarines in movement, and the similarities of like all the information analytically and symbolically involved with the secrets of the temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and the De Beers Diamonds thing about the Europe and the euro dollar, and the halo left side of that symbolic representation between the C and the PTIS, and the Diners Club thing is automatically like Brazoria. Let me make this real clear real quick, okay? Brazoria is 90, okay? And just because one person in Brazoria might be the thought of like a Colombian equating to the Alpha Americans 90, which is really not my case, but the thing with it is that having some idea of a vice president network presenting, or even knowing is really what it really is, presenting a carbon footprint as compared to absentee voting, as some idea of like television programming, or what a deed restriction only seems to be, based upon some idea of whether or not if a deed restriction is only the who knows anyway form, or what availability only means is some idea of like a only involving some idea of maybe anything other than gross national product or a U.S. patent being protected as some idea of tariff that would, be some idea in my mind, maybe yes, maybe not limited to, commercial venue of living quarters, and it seemed to be the deal about the International Electronic Engineering and the big O, the difference between 24 and 39, alphanumerically of the acronym, and getting to the ERP, the YeahAlrightWEA, and the exclusionary rule provision, and the thing about the writs of habeas litigation, the fact that writs of habeas corpus, and some idea of like the history of the television screen between YeahAlrightWEA and John Wayne. Almost like being baptized during the gold rush, and on, the Wells Fargo stagecoach, like American history would dictate, and the thing about Calamity Jane, and all that information about the Pony Express and prepaid postage, and ultimately, the clam and the pearl, and all that information about McDonald's Golden Arches, and practical application apply to, 1 cycle per second of frequency being measured in oscillation. It seems to be the big deal about 1 cycle in pronunciation of like over the N in Spanish. That presents the difference between, it seemed to be really, it really seemed to be, the thing about, occupational safety and health administration with that 1 N, and it seemed to be the one and only where it goes. And the thing about the foundation, and biblical reference that Jesus said he knew before the foundations of the earth, and it's almost, like the equator and the N in Spanish and the frequency, and some idea like experiencing region 0, and some idea like, characterizing, sequencing characterization in sets of 4, only using 2 numbers, 0 and 1, a binary numbers, a computer programming and language that represents some idea below the equator. With that 1 frequency over the N in Spanish, and what the redundant frequency is to monetary and domestic aggregates as compared to, gross national product, and all that information, it seemed to be like putting it all together, what available information means. It seemed to be that one thing about, 1 cycle, symbolically is looking like half above and half below of 1 cycle of frequency being measured in oscillation. Normally it's referred to cycle per second in oscillation, but that one thing about that being an over the N seems to be the pronunciation in Spanish that reflects some idea of the alphanumerics of 69, Texas, Mexico, and Jehovah, and that thing about, below the equator about mammon. And the thing with this is, is that this is Missouri, and in PearlandTexas, it doesn't mean that I'm specifically finding the excuse of maybe only what having fair use is maybe the idea of maybe not knowing, or the significance of whether or not if the idea of knowing or not knowing would only get the perception of like maybe ignorant to the fact of what the difference is between the 1 cycle per second and oscillation would only identify maybe not a question of region 1, the United States and Canada representing, region 1, and not a question of a binary number being region 0, like center point energy. And so get smart, get macro smart, and the idea of a little bit of reality check about the 10 Commandments, and Moses come down from the plateau and being all 7-1 in Pearland and Moses, and all the thing about Babylon 7-1 in Pearland, coming down with the 10 Commandments in the form of Texas, New Mexico power. And it seemed to be the deal about the Roosevelt New Deal Act between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt. It's really, a lot of looking and reading, and this is the year 2025, and it seemed to be the significance of Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal Act, representative like Texas, New Mexico power, and somewhere in between, like the pastel colors of like Univision, representative of like West Loop 610 at Highway 59, and Highway 59 being the alphanumeric 140 in PearlandTexas, and the 3 pastels in the black in the beginning, ultimately now seem to be, since I'm a drummer, And you can see him on my YouTube.com channel at WadeASVPriddy, P-R-I-D-D-Y, at YouTube.com, and WadeArionSV, Priddy, P-R-I-D-D-Y, at YouTube.com. But it seemed to be the significance of that one cycle being, you know, above the N, representing, you know, Spanish as well as maybe the Latin terminology that defines, you know, normally like first day in intro to law, you know, a little bit of Latin terminology. I mean, automatically it's you know, linking, you know, Latin terminology as South America. The thing about being Latin and Spanish is, you know, is that it has that connectivity of the 3 pastels in a black and the 3 pastels in a white, and all that information is secret to simple how the Federal Reserve runs the country, about a Europe-owned, German-owned, mining raw diamonds in South Africa, predominantly the Johannesburg area. Analytically, the thing about Johannesburg is that it's 130 in television, electronic god, somewhere with the colonel participating in HTTP:// or the ratio // it really presents the issue of Abraham Lincoln night vision shuttle government StarGate program and what the colonel is or is not to the Ajax language. Maybe not necessarily the Ajax language, but maybe more so necessarily the colonel, identifying whether or not if television programming is ultimately referring to either a degree, level of consensual participation, like the McDonald's Golden Arches, or, you know, the idea of like the thing about you know, a representative of applied to the frequency being side by side, and the word relation, ultimately getting to even the fertility of an affirmative fallopian tube as compared to a misappropriation allegation of the Mississippi. And the thing with it is that it ultimately gets to the idea of what the equator is, and that one cycle above the N, as far as like a Univision presenting some idea of like a PearlandTexas is the Alpha America 140 and attenuation, holy miracles, and, you know, the Purple Heart thing. And the thing with it is that the secrets of temple house that runs the country, it seemed to really get to the McDonald's Golden Arches and the one cycle above the N, identifying, you know, the thing about some idea below the equator. This is PearlandTexas, okay? Although the Alpha America Brazoria is 90, okay? Like one person having a U.S. dollar in their pocket being some idea of the District of Columbia, or identified as a Colombian, as a carbon footprint or absentee voting out of whim and notion based upon an endorsement of an entire checking account. The thing with this is that, you know, as a foreknowledge and performance monitoring, I mean, where is it stated that, you know, some idea of grayish would be the difference between whether degree, level, of reputable standards, or consensual participation has ever even identified some idea of like a affirmative fallopian tube as some idea of South America, or maybe not. All this in the PearlandTexas area, now from America 71, in pronunciation and spelling, are CIA angels as compared to, you know, devils and demons, and the way it's spelled. It's often getting to whether or not the who knows anyway form is only the idea of a deed restriction based upon maybe just an endorsement as a method of banking, or a boycott embargo, or some idea that endorsement automatically qualifies maybe experiencing, you know, a worldwide circuit of like the StarGate program. Ultimately, even, you know, the Abraham Lincoln night vision shuttle government StarGate program. And ultimately, you know, it seemed to be that really ultimately, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the thing about, you know, the experience, I mean, this is the year 2025, okay. Predominantly, I mean, it seemed to be really originating from a baptism, and even more so, you know, like during 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I mean, it seemed to be of, you know, even more so, I've written of presidents and governors. I mean, now, back then, I mean, it wasn't really that in my mind like at all, that students would hold their hands around the flagpole. You know, obviously, you know, PearlandTexas red, white, and blue thing about, the flag, hold their hands and, like, pray around the flagpole. Okay? Nowhere in my mind, although it was like a June 14th, 1992 baptism at the Mormon Church, which is Galveston County, okay? This is Pearland, Texas. And the thing about, telepathic brainwaves, or the Chevrolet Silverado Z71, or now even including and not that it's just like anything new that I'm just now really mentioning it, but the Chevrolet IROC Z28, and it seemed to be the thing about the spore stone identifying some idea of the depths of the ocean as compared to the coral reefs, and the spore stone using the orthopedic surgery identifying the humerus bone and the pi r² factor of GMC raising a bar, or what that is as American Bar Association, or some like idea of lengthy explanation of guy, man, dude, hood ornament, and having a betweenies in relationship, okay? Or maybe having what fair use only means as the who knows anyway for him. Or what the sign of circumcision only means to the selective service in Harris County, representing like some idea of like alphanumerics of like Egypt, as a sign of circumcision based upon what presidents and governors ultimately like not a word of parental guidance, and PG-13 of like golf courses. So I mean, ultimately, really, it's getting to the idea that realizing going through a StarGate program, that air raids taking place and being inside, and for a 6 to 9 month period, maybe even be a year now. Now that I'm thinking about something about Geneva, Switzerland, and Univision as the 3 pastels, and a black and the 3 pastels and a white, and some duration of like neutrality. I mean, obviously there's the thought there about, the 3 pastels and some idea of the history of the television screen, and some conversion to analog to digital in that way. The thing is that it presents almost like why one pronoun of 4 times pronouns cannot be used as a subject. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to summit meetings in Geneva, Switzerland, presenting some idea of like neutrality, and during the experience you seem to be going through a Bluebird bus, even the American Express Bluebird card, representing, automatically in my mind, the Israeli bird, the blue and purple bird, the whoopa, yet the Airbus H160 is like the blue and white thing of AT&T. It seems to be the point of origin as like 1990 in Brazoria, when AT&T kind of like took over Southwestern Bell, and all the public phones that were like the blue public phones were being removed. I haven't seen one, and I mean, this is year 2025, and this is the 35th year. And to think about memory minus de facto being 35, or JET, and what the deal is in my mind, of like the World Trade Center in 1995, as compared to a 6-year duration, only in my mind, of a president, a vice president network presenting, a 6-year, and how 6 a presidential, it seemed to be, I mean, the alphanumerics in every possible way of 6, pronunciation alphanumeric, and quite a bit about it. And the Boolean chart, it seems to be like the now thing about sequencing characterization in sets of 6, and what auditing legal media is, as compared to like MP4 format, like automatically, or like like YouTube, like I'm going to upload this, automatically to YouTube, YouTube.com, WadeASVPriddy, PRDDY, at YouTube.com, and WadeArianSV, Pretty PRDDY at YouTube.com. The thing with it is that all this information about these books presents like the Nimitz class, and some information of the nuclear-powered ships and the nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and it's almost like the game ship. I mean, the battleship. Before you think about battleship, or the Connect 4 seem to be really the thing about Univision. And the Connect 4 seemed to be like, that game, diagonally in the Houston Post, right at West Loop 610, at Highway 59, and Univision presenting some idea of being above the equator in the Houston, Texas area, Yet Highway 59, at Highway 59 having the alphanumerics of 140, and PearlandTexas alphanumerics attenuation, and I mean the list goes on, including some idea of FBI psychology minus RCA or FDIC, or really even analytically of the Japanese alphabets, letters, and the alphabet of like the Japanese language. According to the information, that there's 22 letters in the Japanese alphabet, predominantly vertical in a 90 degree, and Brazil would be a 90 alphanumerically, okay? It presents the idea of like a conversion. What would be normally the idea of like a conversion from analog to digital, yet presented as a quadrant, as compared to a timeline, like a center line of oscillation. Yet measuring one cycle in oscillation at a 90 degree would look like a circle with a dot with it. And automatically that seemed to be the thing about center point energy. Seemingly it had been being used as region 0, and the who knows anyway form of absentee voting and carbon footprints and a method of banking. I mean, why wouldn't it be? I mean, obviously, even really having any kind of memory minus de facto would only be the idea that an Abraham Lincoln night vision shuttle government StarGate program had only been, only originated knowing and realizing that memory had been a phenomenally huge issue during a 6 to a 9 month period, maybe even a year. And knowing that much, that's when I really knew for the first time that StarGate program, at different locations around the entire world, and it ultimately got to the point of being able to distinguish whether I could even distinguish the difference between a State of the Union address or WadeA International. And it seemed to be the thing about, certain locations at different airports, the thing about the mind's eye and the military barrel deterrent, and the thing of it is that ultimately it seemed to be like somewhere between all that and all this is going on in air raids like while I'm asleep. And I've spent quite a bit of time really thinking about quite a bit about it, because it seemed to be the significance that was ultimately getting to the point of that has led to the Boolean chart, and I will have to spend a little bit of time with it. And the thing with this is that really it ultimately gets to the point of the idea of whether or not of just being a Brazoria or in PearlandTexas. When I say in, I'm referring to boundaries that would only reflect maybe geographics as map. Not limited to been there and all that stuff, but the thing of it is that it seemed to be that those triangles of the screensaver seem to be the thing about the memory, and some idea of a telepathic blueprint on the wall based upon the architecture and platform and the structure, symmetrical asymmetrical issue of what the colon will represent of Austin Powers, Blue Bonnet Imperial Eagle. And the thing about the design of ARO, which is considered a state, federal, and local authority kind of like structure, and it presented some idea like I decided after like 4 or 5 months that I wasn't going to just sit there and just stare at the wall. So ultimately it got to a bunch of alignments on the wall and like a 5 eccentric triangles. And at the time, that everything became is only because of one small stuff on the exact opposite side of the wall, and its placement became, everything about an alignment. Not that I was really not thinking about the Bermuda Triangle. That's more so on the Atlantic side. But what I was like doing ultimately seemed to be a digitized format on the Pacific side of what would be a head east point of view, which would be normally like above anything on the wall, yet the due west would be like to the left, but I did everything to a head east direction towards the high silver toilet, and the Arctic Circle and all that stuff about some connectivity of like Immigration Customs Enforcement and Vice President Network, and what the Arctic Circle is that way, ultimately the Golden Gates, and even the connectivity between the United States and the Soviet Union, not limited to, but it seemed to be the thing about the McDonald's Golden Arches of the Golden Gates, as well as, degree level representatives of consensual participation, and what seemed to be the color of the uniform between. I'm not sure if that all three, like Qatar, Emirates, and Boeing, are all identified as like somewhere in the North and South Korea and China area, representing the olive-colored uniform. And my mind automatically now, the memory, realizing this, what I'm talking about now is a memory that was like, when it was going on, like I really kind of knew it, but the only thing that mattered was like the next few seconds or minutes, okay? But anyway, there's like an olive-colored uniform and the hat, and ultimately seems to be somewhere between like North, South Korea and China, and even it would seem to be now the Lakewood pathway of the blue buildings and the Kim Il thing, in any case. So like that was like another location I was taken to, okay, and ultimately some idea of like the same place that Trump had walked through, that narrow. It's really not kind of narrow, but really kind of not. But the thing when it seemed to be about the prefix of the White House, how true that is, or the Blue Angels, or Korean being the idea of like 64 in American, or HTTP colon, or ratio // the blue buildings that were referred to seem to be, when I actually realized and seen it a little bit about world news and national news, and realized that was like a location I was taken to. And normally when I refer to a location I was taken to, is like being like during air raids, like while I was asleep, and like what's going on, kind of like thing. But in any case, I'm not going to get off into the negative side. Yeah, can you believe it? Not the negative side. Oh no. So like ultimately it seems to be like really ultimately the thing that memory my factor being 35 has ultimately been some idea. So like where's Motown and like Jet Magazine and all that, Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government StarGate program. There had been several locations that I was taken to, and I'm almost thinking that it was at an airport. I'm not sure which airport. Maybe an older version of the Air Force One. Looks like inside like the white interior. I was actually like on it. Actually, didn't grasp like everything that was like going on, or the significance of that fact, what I'm talking about now, and later even some idea. And I'm not real sure about and it seemed to be the thing about the Airbus helicopter pilots and the whole entire situation between like the Bluebird bus and the American Express Bluebird card, and leading the way, and the ethnic background of like the golden McDonald's golden arches, and the thing about ethnic background. I mean, even the Freddie Prinze thing about Chico and the Man and the Chico stick. The color code, the backside of like the American Express Bluebird card. Seem to be, the thing about, the cycle per second above the N in Spanish, and the Freddie Prinze thing about the Chico and the Man, the Chico stick, the color code of like McDonald's golden arches, yet the Golden Gates, yet the idea of like American Express Bluebird card, and innovation leading the way with cutting-edge technology, with that gold edge on the card. And I have one, but it's kind of like I'm kind of like wondering. I've heard it before in my life. Two wrongs don't make a right. It's kind of like, well, what is it really referring to? It's like the prepaid card that's a 15-digit card, okay? And it's kind of like I'm having like, it seemed to be like some idea of like Capital One or financial institutions, kind of like saying, hey, it's kind of like identifying whether or not that the vice president network is trying to, use a carbon footprint and absentee voting as some idea of like a willingness, as a foreknowledge of participation. I'm like, really? Isn't it still happening anyway? Whether it's a foreknowledge or not, is really what it is. Or whether or not the Bureau of Vital Statistics is only presenting some idea between, a birth certificate and, that thing, the tag team thing about it, The The thing is that ultimately, if it's getting to the whole entire point of, some idea of like the Miriam amounts de facto representing 35 and awesome powers and human capital investment terminology on the expenditure side, all this information, including the Nimitz class being something about the Astros in my mind in Minute Maid Field. Even Orson Welles narrating Nostradamus. And the thing about Nostradamus is that Orson Welles narrating it is presenting Nostradamus in his accuracy of predictions for 400 years into the new millennium, which is the year 2000, and combine, like the highest possible score of an SAT test of 2400. Just with that information right there alone, and it presents other information as some idea of the accuracy of 400 years, yet in the new millennium, and all the idea of like 2012 had been presented, the new millennium of 12, or automatically in my mind, knowing what I know about, Anuit Coptus being the alphanumerics, I think it's 204 minus the one and only word in the book of Thessalonians, being, the thing about Mount Olives, and ascending from Mount Olives after the resurrection, and ascending to the sky and re-entering heaven, being that one word of alphanumerics 192 of transfiguration, and all that Anuit Coptus minus transfiguration being 12. And it's somewhere in my mind, it seemed to be the Orson Welles narration in the blue turbans representing, some idea of the Persian Gulf. And all the information linking some like huge triangle as compared to the eccentric triangles, what in my mind on the wall of the color code of like, International Financial Management SAN software, of like a telepathic blueprint with the 5 eccentric triangles. Automatically, it's like the fifth dimension in my mind. The alphanumerics 33, the 5, and the T and the H, or the E bank, the E error thing, fifth dimension, and what DC is to dimensional falls and direct circuitry. The fifth dimension sings that song up in the air in a beautiful balloon, and ultimately it gets to the Orion performance monitoring with the different colors of like the hot air balloons presenting, the mandatory requirements of a rainbow of condensation and evaporation based upon temperature and altitude. And the thing about Orion performance monitoring is that it ultimately gets to like the AOL, America Online, or even the pronunciation of the heartbeat of America, and an ablation or ablation. Either way it goes in pronunciation, one is analytically ultimately, an act of God, 7-1 in Pearland. The other is like the heartbeat of America. There seems to be the idea of an ablation or ablation, some idea of controlling arrhythmia and, atrial fibrillation as a procedure. Something about it had ultimately led to, 911 calls based upon, some idea that I didn't believe a thing about it, because obviously there's been an issue in this area, in the immediate area, about, what consumption is. And if they approved, some idea of like, motivation that seemed to be beyond the idea of like, I don't know if it would just have to be maybe some idea of tolerance is FDA approved, or some idea, but there was like a deal that seemed to be ultimately getting to electrophysiology and getting charged, and getting some perception of like low voltage, yet at the same time it presented, some idea of like consumption that obviously generated some idea like energy building up in my body, getting electrocuted like midair. I'd be like practicing my drums, and I'm not real sure if it's really, the factor of like black light, violet rays, as well as I had a 10,000 Rockville 10,000 watt power amp, and doing it all day, all into the night. Practicing my drums, okay, with like everything like you see on YouTube, but like a lot's going on, and some idea of like access, and at this point, like being yourself or not, you're going to hear it and listen to every word of it, okay? And so being yourself is obviously not the question of like, because I'm not going to be shy about you being yourself, okay? In any case, so like so ultimately it gets to some idea, like, hey, I'm a drummer, okay? Ultimately being on YouTube has been a whole idea of like, some idea of intellectual property in my mind isn't, you know, the automatic perception of what lifespan means is intellectual, you know, property, or what having fair use is in international law dictating what lifespan only is. I mean, if it's often getting to a deed restriction or a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate as redundant frequency, or some idea of intellectual duration based upon geographic attachment, or, you know, just like, you know, some idea of a DVD or a music video or television programming, whether it's live or not, I mean, it's still K television, and ultimately a PG-13 rating of Fox 29 News, in my mind, ultimately getting to, you know, the W television, what seemed to be the entire national, like, deal about W television network in Philadelphia that way. Ultimately, even the thing about the Benjamin Franklin thing, the key and the kind, and Franklin, just the name Franklin, representative of the, like, the 100 Club, or some idea, like now, seemed to be like the class of 1981. And somewhere in my mind about walking through, you know, like a Soviet Union room, ultimately gets to be like what was then, you know, during high school, like bleachers, little aluminum bleachers for like the choir. Ultimately even getting to the football stadium and television series Friday Night Lights and the Permian Basin, and all the information about the Permian Basin in my mind, and the plateau, as well as graphite, and even the vital statistics, Bureau of Vital Statistics of a footprint, ultimately going beyond, you know, what would normally be like a black footprint on a birth certificate, and being like a white footprint of obviously some issue that's like really taking place, and has happened like in my lower legs based upon consumption. Whether it's some idea of like, you know, a white footprint going beyond some idea of like a new man in Christ, or some idea like, you know, Cloud 9, or, you know, a bunch of, you know, alphanumerics involving white in 65, or the alphabet. The thing of it is that ultimately it seems to be getting to the Social Security Administration's phone number all over again, about the 1-800-772, you know, 12 and 13, ultimately gets to 64 and 65, or the COVID ID 19 thing about, you know, 1964 being 83, or 1965 being 84. And, you know, the thing about the books, Secrets of the Temple, How Threads Over in this Country, and a chapter, Winners and Losers. And it seems to be so, in my mind, about the McDonald's Golden Arches, in that one cycle above the letter N in pronunciation of Latin terminology and Spanish, presenting the whole idea of the equator and the operator in Chevrolet and alphanumerics of 108, A and 0 being alphanumerics of 64, because the operator is obviously 108 Chevrolet or bicentennial, and the list goes on about, you know, 108 and 0 being the alphanumerics of 64, and HTTP colon American, Israeli, and Egypt, and excuse me, let me rephrase that, American and Israel, and, you know, like Zion, okay, and the thing about the 1,000 years of peace, okay, and ultimately, you know, somewhere in the mind of the transfiguration after the resurrection, or some idea of Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, okay, and the Rolling Stones really seem to be about that telekinetic roll of the pen. Ultimately, you know, the idea of like going beyond Chevrolet Corvette as a veterinarian, as a telekinetic roll of the pen, it seemed to be, I mean, the thing that ultimately leads to the thought of going beyond GMSE promissory notes, or what would be maybe some idea of like a loss prevention, and the idea of like a suppression. And it only seems to be of neighborhoods involving, you know, monetary and domestic, as suppression of like loss prevention, and some idea of the K9 unit, you know, some idea of like leaving the bank, or some idea of human capital, or some other factor of like, you know, having fair use of a name and identity, and some idea of like, you know, some recent statute compared to, you know, the IRA and some Apple iPhone issue between Apple and Oracle, and in that way, or, you know, the color code of the Air Force One or the White House being the IRA, the 1040EZ form. I mean, it's not limited to the 1040EZ form, but ultimately it gets to the prefix of the White House and the Blue Angels of the Air Force, and all the information about California Angels. I mean, baseball, I mean, for real. And ultimately it gets to the hot dog thing. It seemed to be the thing about, even telekinetic roll of the pen. It's ultimately got to, the thing about between Coney Island and der Wiener Schnitzel. And a CD and a DC thing about, some idea of the telekinetic roll of the pen in a whole different perspective. But it's not necessarily the grade. I mean, every time it's looked at it, analytically, symbolically, alphanumerically, linguistically, everything that seemed to me, it's not limited to, the idea of like a, mind power as some idea of Annette Pentillo's like Pinocchio. Or really maybe it's the idea of the misappropriation allocation between some idea of like a Chevrolet Corvette or some idea of like a, Coney Island and der Wiener Schnitzel presenting some idea of ratio between a double forward slash or the telekinetic roll of the pen, only the issue seemed to be the real idea of, ultimately, why one pronoun, the 4 types of pronouns cannot be, used as a subject is ultimately getting to, like once again, the hot dog issue. Or, or is that like 2 dogs pissing on the same tree at the same time? Or something, old time like, baseball terminology. In any case, so like, it's already going on like 51 minutes. And ultimately, it seemed to be that, all this information is like really, it seemed to be like, it's kind of like, I'm in a tent in my own home, okay? And ultimately, it seemed to be like leading to like, hey, at this point, I mean, hey, I'm worth it, yeah. I feel like being like a international superstar. I'm on supplemental security income, and all this talk about that I'm talking about, like misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi and the ISS and the SSI and the PPI, but an international superstar and supplemental security income or international space station or international secret services or superstar intelligence and, kind of like, well, really, I mean, is that really what's been going on? Is that what it's been? The idea of like a star being born in my mind is like automatically not funny. Or a telepathic star is born based upon a baptism as a point of origin. Ultimately, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to all those students during 6th, 7th, and 8th grade holding their hands around the flagpole and praying, and some idea like June 14th, 1992 on Flag Day, Saturday morning, as a SAT, highest possible score of a baptism, ultimately related to the book cover, Psychic Warrior, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover up of the top secret CIA StarGate program. I mean, I'm just like, all this is just like, happening. It's like finding it and believing anything about it would be really not the question at this point, the way, I mean, what I have to say about it. I mean, even knowing this kind of information is actually, like, seriously not funny. So, like, in any case, so, like, that's what it means to be in Pearland right now. Pearland, Texas, yeah. Anyway, like, I don't know what it is about musicians or even, the immediate area or some idea, like, I don't know if it's an idea of, like, a certain idea of, like, entertainment way international as a preliminary prejudice to product registration of a birth certificate or some idea of the secrets of the temple hospitals over in the country and some idea of something below the equator identifying the history of the U.S. dollar as District of Columbia doesn't mean like I'm from like District of Columbia at all. I might be surrounded in an area that I've thoroughly really ignored. Ignoring it now just isn't going to happen. Think about my musical instrument being switched and changed or minimized and some idea of like what seemed to be repudiation or some idea of like a projected estimate option in future is some checkmate, region like zero, like oh my God, what are you talking about? Or the big-eyed what thing. So ultimately it gets to like whether or not if AT&T of international network operations is, some idea like, Accra So what is it about Acra, like in Pearland, Texas, or is it just like really Pearland, Texas, or maybe just the alphanumerics of my name being 213, or telepathic brainwaves of the Chevrolet Silverado Z71 in Pearland, and hopefully the California Angels in what, Pearland, California? I mean, not a word to this day. I mean, not even. I mean, I don't believe a thing about family law, even more so in the immediate area. I mean, convince me that family laws in any kind of way of reality really isn't going to happen. So all that talk about, something about District of Columbia, or some idea like just because the person is in Brazoria, or being some idea like a one person or an individual as an endorsement, or the U.S. $1 bill, for seeing some idea like being Brazoria, or some idea of a U.S. $1 bill being automatically identified below the equator in South America. This is Pearland, Texas, okay? Doesn't mean I'm a Colombian, I mean at all, is really what I'm saying. It doesn't mean I'm from Colombia. Doesn't mean I was born there. Of course, I've been led to believe I've had parental guidance and convinced me anything about family law really ain't going to happen. I mean, ultimately it gets to, like, obviously, presidents and governors and a PG-13 rating and everything that I'm talking about, whether family law is making it great even beyond, business law. Or it seems the difference between corporate and business law as some idea of ratio, or importing and exporting as compared to a vice president network, presenting some idea of whether or not if a carbon footprint and absentee voting is some idea of like, a boycott embargo, because it's like not necessarily U.S. constitutional laws as blackmail. So like, what's all that about? I mean, is that like a presidential reference as read my lips? So like, what's that supposed to mean in the George Bush administration? So like, what's that supposed to mean with General Motors and promissory notes? That's presidential reference. So I mean, does a promissory note mean a projected estimate of Acura? Or Psychology Today in Pearland, Texas? I mean, so like, where's the depreciation? Where's the complement and depreciation? I mean, is it somewhere like in Univision, somewhere between like 3 pastels in a black and 3 pastels in a white, in the form of like Chimney Rock and like the drum shop? And it's just like line 6, equating to 92 and a drummer, an Emirate and guitar, airline and Boeing airline and Fort Stockton, Texas. That's the James Law unit presenting line 6. Or is it just really line 6? Electric guitar combo amp, only based upon Ector County being some idea of Vantage Love 30 is sector guitar. And the 30 being the S, the H and the C, the SC and H being 30 of Ector and sector and a guitar and guitar airline and line 6. V-Series combo amp. And it seemed to be the Alaskan thing, likewise in addition. And, all that information about Twin Peaks and the Asterix that does the Infinity commercial. Likewise, I mean, the Alaskan television series, Twin Peaks, presenting that one word, copacetic. It's ultimately like from all the way from Alaska to like Houston and the Keystone Pipeline and all that information that seemed to be, the color code or the ratio between the black and the white of the space shuttle. NASA, Air Force, we know the thing about the space shuttle. And the color of a holy seagull. And the grayscale of, the history of a television screen. And that's why I'm like, it's like, so like, where's my like commercial venue of living quarter, making it beyond internet protocol, of local area network, a maritime law, and some idea like being on YouTube is like change the perception of what others may have like had it been they themselves, and the who knows anyway forum as a presidential reference, as a vice president network, or is that like parental guidance? It's like some idea of a DBA, a database administration, kind of throwing it off on doing business as an endorsement of an entire history of a checking account in a freaking bank. It's really what it is. or some other idea about the acronym. It seemed to be like whether or not a vice president network, the VPN, is only a virtual personal network, or some idea like a release of obligation, or what is it, the duty and oath of like only monetary and domestic duty and oath, or it's not necessarily the obligation of the Golden Gate. So what is the obligation as compared to duty and oath? I mean, is there a difference between gross national product and monetary and domestic? I mean, with that terminology, itself? Or the FBI identifying, the color code of the midnight blue during 1995, which seems to be like really intense stuff like I was going through, not limited to, in different locations around the entire world. So like, now it's kind of like, really, so like the entire world is like, what does it mean to speak English? Be bilingual, trilingual. A linguistic like genius, speaking 4 or 5 languages, if not more. So like here in Pearland, it seems to be like, really not a funny situation about even Apple iPhone. It seemed to be like, continual issues involving language. Automatically, I'm on YouTube and experiencing all kinds of, you gotta be kidding me. So what is it, gaining what? Gaining like, it's maintaining the attention of the audience. So like what is it, about PearlandTexas and alphanumerics linguistics and attenuation and sigma alpha delta beta, wait a minute, sigma alpha delta kappa phi, that would probably be more so. So what is it, the depreciation? Is it having a form of godness but denying the power thereof? Is this like what's going on in real estate as compared to what I like to sprite in you? Over jurisprudence and the black back involving what jurisprudence? And that one word, repudiation, between warehousing and real estate? Of the entire, volume of state statutes annotated? Some color code? Of a black dot on a map? Or caviar made to be on the front lines, beachfront of like primate spawning because it's not blackmail beyond the front lines of the beachfront? But is caviar like, with hors d'oeuvres and, it's not like boycott and embargo? Hors d'oeuvres and caviar? Because it's not blackmail. So like what's that supposed to mean? Is that the read my lips thing about it? Read my lips? Really? Am I supposed to know something? Am I hearing it all the time? What are you waiting for? Don't you really want me to hear it? Or see it? Okay, let's talk about incoherence, okay? All this military time. So what does that mean? As a preliminary purchase of product registration of a birth certificate of presidents and governors and what parental guidance means? As what? A sign of circumcision? So what does that mean? Masturbation? Does that mean agreement? What does it mean? The alphanumerics is 206 in Brazoria, country, sign of circumcision. So what does that mean? Had it been they themselves or the who knows anyway for them? Some ratio between HTTP : // and you got your thumb up your ass? The rule of thumb, who are you trying to kid? The white ERP, exclusionary rule provision of executive powers, sovereign immunities and governmental amnesties, the rule of thumb? Citing annotation, huh? So what does that mean? Does that mean relation between platform and architecture? Or a 90-degree of the equator? Identifying some quadrant in globalization in the Oval Office? Or a relation between platform and what? Architecture? As embedded encryption? Because are you saying that anything below the equator is only some idea of, like, not the United States in region 1 as binary numbers? Or is it the degree non-degreed issue between the United States and region 0 as non-degreed, as non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, as cash flow? Somewhere in between FHA and HUD loans as reimbursement, as entitlement to a reimbursement of premiums paid in the event of what? Default? And not having a claim on it as if the FDIC claim representing commercial venue of a projected estimate. And it's don't tell me it's the imagination of Houston and Pearland, a Pearland home. Don't tell me it's the imagination of some spiritually gifted telepathic communication as alphanumeric linguistics, skipping class. So, the thing with this is that really, ultimately, that's like a, not necessarily the mood-altering, religious experience that I don't know, is that a mood-altering religious experience? Is some idea a de facto? Or some degree level, maybe not religion? But have one anyway? Have a religion going through what? A worldwide network? So, like, what does that mean? Does it mean alphanumerics is 71? CIA angels? So, like, what's that supposed to mean? It's like 71. Yeah, so, like, what's that mean? Yay, alright. Yay, alright. CIA angels. Yay, alright. Or does it mean devils and demons? Don't tell me it's the freaking ass heartbeat of America over the alphanumerics of 52 or some freaking ass devil that you decided is a carbon footprint or an absentee voting is some idea of, like, relation? Really, when does that happen? During the read my lips George Bush administration? So, like, what's that supposed to mean? Is that supposed to be like a dream theater music video of sacrificed sons? Don't tell me this is crazy strong. A boycott embargo is constitutional law representing space exploration and some idea like, some mother lode looking for an umbilical cord for the mother lode in space exploration. What else would you expect to hear? This is the year 2025. I'm 59 years of age and it's it. Because, like, it would be the only real decision to make for, don't tell me it's the idiot's fee of a 10 being 59 and, like, all that Highway 59 stuff in PearlandTexas. And it's just that I'm 59 years of age, and don't tell me that I just planned all this, okay? But it's been made available. Wow, it really happens, like Psychology USA and the degree genius of economics and availability of importing and exporting. And so, like, it's been made available, and this is what it looks like of what availability means. So I'm looking for, like, the ratio, like a commercial venue promoting better health and wellness beyond the toilet. So, like, what does that mean in relation? So, like, what does that mean to, like, SWAT? Some idea of, like, what is that, the Surgeon General? Somewhere between the Eurodollar, there's, like, music videos and some idea of, like, SWAT on, like, YouTube. And another location I was taken to. So, like, what does that mean? Is it the Eurodollar about the Surgeon General? Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one, yeah. So what's the deal about SWAT? Is the Surgeon General in the way of, like, the Eurodollar? Or Germany? Or is it the Beers, Diamonds, and all that information of secrets of the temple, how those over in the country? Or is it really the humorous bone and the pi squared factor of GMC's raising a bar? Maybe it's living color, maybe. 1 to 1 makes 3. Like 4, maybe 5 inches, maybe 4.5, maybe 5 inches of my humerus bone between my shoulder and elbows like removed, and I'm waking up not even knowing that I've been operated on. No signs of it or anything, or duration presenting any visible anything other than obviously must have been involving like lasers, involving like, you know, orthopedic surgery. So like now the spore stone seem to be the forecast of the weather in WeahAlrightWEA International of orthopedic surgery in the front lines of the beachfront all over again. So like yeah, so like I'd really like to have my 4.5, maybe 5 inches of like, you know, my humerus bone back, okay? And maybe increase the idea of like what presidents and governors meant to, you know, parental guidance as sign of circumcision, or some idea of like, you know, wishful thinking, or some like infrastructure, you know, presented as a screensaver, or something like, hey, it's good to see you. Wow, that's quality lamination, huh? So like anyway, I mean, it's at the, don't tell me it's the diaphragm. And what is it? A colonoscopy, a diaphragm and a colonoscopy? With a ratio of what? Coney Island and der Wiener Schnitzel representing what? The Chevrolet Corvette? As some idea like between what? The veterinarian and very Aryan Science of Latin? And the difference between Orion performance monitoring and Aryan Science of Latin monitoring? I mean, is it that there's like, how could it not be at this point? That AOL, America Online, is only presenting the idea of the heartbeat of America, of similarities of like congestive heart failure, or controlling arrhythmia as a drummer, or atrial fibrillation, and like who knows anyway form? Or is that like the tree on top of a high rise after it's completed, the atrial fibrillation? Was that a breach of like worldwide like securitized like idea, like atrial fibrillation? It's like, what is that supposed to mean? The heartbeat of America is a carbon footprint and absentee voting, and the similarities hopefully getting to a pericardium, and likewise mesothelioma, and even an apparatus in the lungs involving what, some inhalation, smoke inhalation of like toxic freaking ecology, presenting the same similarities of mesothelioma of actual tissue of the lungs and fluid being trapped in between. Yes, something of like chemical burn of like inhalation. What was it? Really, do I know what I'm talking about? It presents the same similarities of being trapped in between two layers of congestion and wheezing. And how many years has this been going on? I'm just now, you gotta be, well, you're obviously not joking, okay? So like, what's that mean in the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government StarGate program? That I'm right here in Pearland, Texas, where I've always been, and like, what's going on? Negotiated what? Analytical, what is that? The idea of like body parts? To what different governments is some idea? The Rolling Stones, and some idea of the one and only word of transfiguration being Mount Olives, and the colored of uniforms of and a military barrel determinants of the mind's eye. Other than that, you know, like really, wow, a star is born, huh? A telepathic star. Is it airborne? Is it limited to? A baptism. Can you believe it? June 14th, 1992, as a point of origin. 1992. The Mormon Church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Friendswood, Texas, is Galveston County, the C71 in Pearland. Like, really? Am I still experiencing the carbon footprint? Or is it they'll see you wouldn't want to be a thing? Really, is that what it is? So like now there's like yeah, like now I like need my entire upper and lower dental implants. Single individual, yeah. And humerus bone, yes, of the spore stone, and oh yes, perfect equality and, you know, skeletal, you know, structure. Oh my God, in the relation, oh my God, I'm going to have the eyeballs exceeding above my beltway because GMC's raising a bar and it has a power squared E equal MC squared. Really? So like, what does that mean? I'm going to have eyeballs above my beltway as network operations? Wow. I can hardly wait. I mean, so is it the relation you're looking for? As a projected estimate, had it been maybe they themselves as proper English numerical composition? Or maybe somewhere in alphanumerics and linguistics and some symbolic representation of a StarGate program? maybe a hint or a clue, or maybe not at all. So this is what it means to be like me in Pearland, Texas, okay? Okay, I don't know what it is about the immediate area about me being a drummer. There's some idea like what seemed to be like, really, is it the lifespan of an intellectual? I mean, so like what's that supposed to mean? That I bought a compact disc? A music video? So like what's that supposed to mean? So it's really going to get to it, isn't it? So like what's that supposed to mean? Copyright? Is it a copyright issue? Is it maybe the perfection? Although is it that all this is happening and maybe not the perfection based upon? What is that, unconditional love? Or is it maybe because you're not a musician? So like what's that supposed to mean? Giving reference to a presidential inaugural ball as some idea? An inaugural ball. In any case, yeah. So it's already going on like an hour and, what is that? Is that 18 minutes and 18 seconds? Wow. Yeah, alright, yeah. Well, great. Well, good. Yeah, there it is, okay?